You're listening to the Access Success Podcast, produced by AccessU, a division of Access Advertising and Public Relations. Hey, let's do something big. I'm your host, Rachel Schneider. Welcome back to the Access Success Podcast, where we highlight important topics focused on education in every form it takes. Today, we'll be discussing the cost of college. And I don't know about you, listener, but I really didn't understand the value of my education until I was very, very familiar with the weight of debt my generation was experiencing. And this was after being told most of our lives that college was a mandatory pathway for success. You had to go to college. But was college always this expensive for the average American? An article from the Chronicle of Higher Education titled "The College Affordability Problem" explores the issue of making college more affordable. We've seen a dramatic increase in tuition over time. Adjusted for inflation, average tuition and fees at a public four-year institution has increased 150% over the past 3 decades. For this episode, we're bringing in 2 members of our AccessU faculty to speak on this issue and their experiences talking to students. Ricky Parker is the executive director of the Ruth Coles Harris Leadership Institute at Virginia Union University's Sidney Lewis School of Business. Parker is also an adjunct professor of marketing, a research associate at the Center for African American History and Culture, and curator for the Museum of African Art at Virginia Union. Parker also serves as an adjunct professor of advertising at Virginia Commonwealth University. And before Ricky shares his insights, you'll hear the familiar voice of our thought leader, Monica Gomez, counselor for the Office of Recruitment and Admissions at Northern Virginia Community College. Enjoy the conversation. Monica, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to talk to you again.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so can we get some of your first impressions and insight based on the article?
Sure. Yeah, when I saw even just the title of the article, it really, just kind of rings to things that we've been hearing in the news, reading about within higher education for a long time now. So it's not anything that's new. I think it's kind of back in the spotlight because of the recent conversations around student loan forgiveness and those programs. But I think the overarching college affordability theme is kind of, something that's been talked about for a long time. And I think just seeing that another article is being written about it now, I think it's always important to keep it in the limelight because it is such a big, problem for a lot of students, not being able to afford or really not even understanding what it means to go to college and what the end result will be in terms of taking on debt. And so I think that it's a big issue and something that students and families need to be, kind of educated on, which I think is important.
Well, what was so crazy to me also is just seeing how much tuition has risen over the years and just that dramatic rise compared to, the early 90s to where we are now. And my generation, especially, you were told, hey, you've got to go to college. You have to go to college to get a good job. And I don't know if many people expected to see that jump in the cost when they were marketing college so heavily.
Yes, that's very true. It's quite dramatic to see it, in a chart or a graph of any kind, because it is pretty stark. And I think you're right. We grew up in that kind of era where it was like college. And, I think, now that's changing a little bit. There's been more focus on workforce development programs and programs preparing students to go to work, especially coming from a community college perspective. Workforce development programs are a big part of what we do. And, when talking to students and families about what the community college can offer, that can be a great avenue that doesn't entail, as much time, therefore not as much money, so those are some good alternatives. I think that, families and students should, again, know what their options are so that they can really figure out, is that what I want? Do I want something more traditional, with, a bachelor's, associate's, bachelor's, and onward from there, or something that could get them right to work, as soon as, they can finish a 1 or 2 year program. So I think that there's some good options that the community college can provide the community in terms of affordability. So I think that is certainly something to look at.
I think we're also seeing more personalization when it comes to a student's studies at a community college. I mean, what are some of your experiences as a counselor being able to work with students and, maybe their path is a little bit different than somebody else's? How can a community college accommodate their unique schedule? Or, if they're maybe unsure of what they want their major to be at, how can they ensure that they are working towards the right credentials for at least the field or the path that they are interested in?
Right. And that's going to be super important for students to get connected with advisors, career coaches or career advisors at the college, at the community college, so that they can kind of be put on the right path. Because a lot of times, especially students that are younger, that are coming maybe right out of high school, tend to not have, maybe the immediate focus, on what they want to do, which is completely normal. What 18-year-olds, know what they want to do for the rest of their life. So I think it's very important that they do connect with an advisor. And if they do decide that they want to transfer, we have, folks here at the community college that can help them on that specific path. And then again, we have workforce programs where we have, people in that department that can help guide them, so really just helping them navigate. But I think a conversation to start with is really important, so that especially, I tend to work more with students just coming out of high school and into the college for the first time. So those students, I think, sometimes need a little bit more guidance. So having some little, hands-on connection and meeting with them face-to-face or virtually really can help them navigate what some of the choices are, because it can be overwhelming for them. So I think that's important, is to be able to connect with somebody and ask questions, and sometimes, kind of provide an overview of what their options are, because sometimes the students don't even know what questions to ask. So they don't know what they don't know. So that's a big thing that we see as well.
Well, and along with that, are there any details that you find students are surprised to find out? Like, what can marketers maybe do a better job at informing students about when it comes to whether it be, applying for college and just the college experience nowadays versus what it used to be like? I know that we have so many more virtual options that, it's kind of becoming like an Amazon experience. You can go online and sign up for classes.
Right.
But if you're unsure how to navigate that, what are some things that people in the marketing department or others working with colleges to get the word out can do?
Yeah, I think doing kind of like, step by steps, like how to guides and things like that can be really helpful. You don't want to overwhelm students with a lot of writing because they tend to not read a lot of information. So anything that can be, shortened and kind of snippets, kind of like, thinking of like a Twitter type of thing, where it's, limited to a certain number of words, but things like bullet points or steps, I think can be very helpful. Students tend to navigate, to that. Even some kind of tutorials, whether it's YouTube videos or anything that, again, the kind of short snippets of how to do things, can be really helpful, I think, for this generation.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add about just going forward as far as college affordability and different resources that students should maybe check? I know that different states have different types of financial support available or even free programs. It just depends on where you live and where you look.
Right. Exactly. In Virginia, we are pretty lucky currently have a program called G3 with the Virginia Community College System. And that has provided students with an opportunity where, the larger national free college programs haven't really been able to get off the ground. As you mentioned, a lot of states, including Virginia, have provided some type of free college programs. And our G3 programs with community colleges here in Virginia really, again, kind of highlight some of those right to work programs. So our applied associate's degrees, which really prepare students to go into the workforce and getting them working as soon as possible. But again, providing these additional funds to help them, pay for whatever isn't covered through financial aid. So it can potentially, would be free of charge to the students without them having to come out of pocket. So I think that can be especially, helpful for students interested in some of these really high need programs like, healthcare, nursing. We know that there's a big need for nurses, and, programs can be pretty competitive. But again, students who are able to get into these programs, need help with funding. So this can be a great way for, students to get that additional support financially. So I think it's a great opportunity.
I agree. It's just been wonderful to see with G3 and also the Virginia Ready Initiative, between the two, whether you're going into IT, public safety, healthcare, skilled trades, professions, and early childhood education was the other one with G3. We've gotten to talk to so many students, and they come from such different backgrounds. Some are parents that are going back and want to earn these credentials, and others, like you mentioned, they're straight out of high school and they're just looking for their options at their nearby community college. And it's cool to see that they're not going to be bogged down by debt, because we do have those opportunities. And the more we can get the word out and people can find their path, we love to see it. We love to hear more stories like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's a great thing, and I hope that programs like this, continue to put the community college system in our state, kind of in the spotlight, because unfortunately there are still those rumors out there about community colleges, being less than, the education is not as good or whatever it might be. But I hope that with these types of programs that are geared again to put Virginians out into the workforce as soon as possible and providing them with that financial support to get through those programs, will really highlight what good community colleges can do for the Commonwealth and for the people, trying to get, employment and work and something that's sustaining for them and their families. And so I think that these programs kind of put us on that track. So that's exciting.
100%. And just seeing how that stigma has changed over time, because I remember thinking, oh gosh, I don't want to have to go to community college, because my high school advisors were so hell-bent on having students get the most college acceptances to like the most prestigious colleges. And I think that mindset is really shifting, because high schoolers and their families are now thinking more towards, hey, actually, where can we find good paying jobs where we don't have to go to school for 4 years and we don't have to go out of state, or, all these other factors that come into play. So it's wonderful to watch that stigma kind of be broken down as more people find out what their community colleges have to offer. So
yes,
great points. Well, yeah. Monica, thanks so much again.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Rachel.
Absolutely. Ricky, thanks so much for being able to join us today. We always enjoy getting to talk to you. Can you just tell us your first impression after reading the article, just in general about college affordability, especially coming from your perspective as being somebody who currently works in higher ed?
Yeah, no, first and foremost, thank you, Rachel. Definitely excited to stop by and just share some insight. After reading the article, I think it was really on pulse with a lot of conversations I think I've been having over the last few years just about higher education and college. I think with COVID-19 and just how that kind of changed the format of college for a lot of people, forced a lot of universities to go virtual, or even now, I think a lot of universities are in this hybrid model. I think it really kind of showed just with that added cost. A lot of times I think a lot of parents are able to kind of see that the first time where, all right, if I have a son or daughter and they're in their freshman year, but now they're still at home, it's almost like I'm not paying room and board, all these extra fees. It's almost like now I'm saying, like, at the bare, minimum, how much is that education or, achieving a bachelor's degree actually? And then I think another thing with it is a lot of times, I think now we're entering a place or a time frame with higher education where it's no longer just this template of, go to undergrad, get your bachelor's, go to graduate school, get a master's, and, you're going to have a great job, where I really believe it's a formula to it. And there's not like one size fits all, but it's really intentional about where you want to go. And so I'm just really big on this Mark Twain quote that kind of guides me for a lot of things. How he said, "I never let my schooling interfere with my education." And so even with that, I think we're at this place now where I believe Uh, I'm not going to say that the bachelor's degree is going to be obsolete, but I think there are a lot of other things that can complement it. I think it may now be a place where we're now seeing a lot of kids come out of high school and they're taking a gap year, and trying to go into the workforce. Or, even after you're in a bachelor's, maybe it may not even be graduate school. Maybe it's, you're just focusing on certifications. And so there's a lot of different combinations now where I think there's even a lot of employers that are more open to this idea of just certifications or just having certain skills, where I think a lot of times just for having a degree, it doesn't justify a skill set. And so I think now we're at this place of this combination of like, how does education meet experience in this unique way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that in regards to the bachelor's degree, because one of our clients, Virginia Ready, they've actually spoken about calling that step the paper ceiling, because for people who don't have a bachelor's degree, that can be another barrier against them, not getting a job or not being considered for a position that they very well may have the skills for. Or maybe they've earned credentials at community colleges and have gotten that training, but just because they don't have that piece of paper, it's been an extra barrier. And I'm curious, because I know you're an adjunct professor at 2 different universities. So what perspectives have you heard from, your students about how they're able to afford college? Or, I guess generationally, I know that we know affordability of college has changed so much in just like the past 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I think a lot of times I think for a lot of the students I've had, just over I've been teaching for 7 years. So for me, I've had a lot of students that have had an idea of like what their interest is, and this is why I'm majoring in this, but have no idea how to get to the destination of where they want to get to. And so I think they're kind of left in the swamp where I think a lot of times I meet juniors or seniors, and like they're just at this place where yeah, I had an internship, but it wasn't the best, or I'm applying to jobs, but I really don't know what to do next. And so I think it gets to this place like I went to college, but college really isn't giving me all the answers. I'm getting this degree, but it's really not affording me or giving me the keys to open up these doors where I really can go track down my dream path. And so a lot of times I really challenge students to really focus on their passions. And so a lot of times I just ask people I teach a range of marketing courses, advertising courses. So I just ask students what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about skateboarding? Are you passionate about beauty stuff? Are you passionate about video games? What are you passionate about? Let's focus on that first. And once you focus on what you're passionate about, let's just think about what companies, what job roles are in these spaces. Because in it, if you're focusing on, you're giving yourself some type of direction, at least knowing all right, if I go into a field that I'm passionate about, it's not going to feel like work. Or even if I really have to grind it out and, have another internship, or I really have to start an entry-level job, I'm at least going to have some excitement because I'm doing something I have an interest with. And I think a lot of times, that's the downfall for a lot of people out of undergrad, where you don't get your dream job, and your first job out is not the ideal situation you thought you would be doing. And so it's just I think this becomes the larger piece of, I think, people fall into, when you think of undergrad. And this is where I think even the article is speaking to this whole idea of student loans, where it's I have all these loans, I have a college degree, but I'm doing something I'm not passionate about, I'm not happy about, and I'm really not making the money I want to make. And so in it, it's just more so, I think we have to push students to be very intentional about what they want. Because I think a lot of times, I've even seen it in my generation, it's even growing up, you'll kind of do things or push for careers that, your elders or, your professors or your mom and dad or your aunts and uncles just tell you should do, but instead of focusing on what's really going to make you happy. And so I think, the more we push students in a place of really focusing on how do you find these spaces that you feel like, you're going to be whole, you're going to be happy, you're going to be energized about, the work's going to come natural, or like you growing in these spaces is going to come natural. But, I've had students I've met, and like they're in majors that, I just got this major because someone told me to do this, but I have no passion around it. I was like, and so I'm a big believer that, college isn't for everyone, or I don't think everyone should go to college straight out of high school, because I think a big piece of college, I believe at college, you definitely find yourself as a defining moment. But if you don't have an idea of the road you want to go in, I think, all of us have probably experienced that, being in college, the person you meet your first semester, by the time the second semester or your sophomore year comes, they're no longer there, where, this is the person I just came, really didn't have an anchoring or idea where I want to take my life. I'm just here. And before I know it, it's just like, it's like a whirlwind where it's happening too fast. And so I think it has to be a lot more intentionality with college, where, there is a bill with it, there is a cost. And so I think the fact there is a cost, it can't be something just lackluster where, we just force kids into like, oh yeah, you finish high school, go to college, but really take some time, really figure out what you really want to do. And I think really finding the right spaces to cultivate that.
And how can marketers help in that respect? Like, how can they make sure they're playing a good part in this to help students find out what their passions are and make sure that those pathways are marketed and that students know that they're available to them?
I think a great way is really connecting the majors with career paths. I think a lot of times, a lot of students aren't aware of like, if I had this major, I can go down this career path, or it can help me get here. And so I think, a lot of times, you got to think about when you're 15, 16, you don't have that foresight of like understanding like, if I get a history degree, this is going to put me down the path where I can do anything in politics, policy. I even go to law school. You really don't have all of that unless someone's sitting down and telling you. And so I think a lot of times it's really kind of explaining the options that come with these majors, or just the career paths with it. Because I think if someone gets that understanding, I think that's how you make a degree offering more appealing. And it stands out a lot more, where a lot of times I think it's just, a lot of students will pick things that are just popular, or just trending. Oh, my friends are getting this major, or everyone's telling me they're majoring in this, or I can make a lot of money in this major. But it's not really something you have a clear idea of like, what is my career path, or like, what's the dream job I want?
Well, and when people are unclear of their path, I mean, I know that I have friends that are going back to school because the original major that they thought they needed to get is not actually what they're passionate about. So they end up spending more money to get a different degree, or, get their master's in a completely different field or different credentials. So how can marketers also make sure that that information about assistance and also, a variety of programs and job pathways is being received by students?
I think it's so heavily focused on like the high school population, but I think it's like two demographics a lot of times. I think marketers in higher education miss, where I think it's really like the elementary school child, like the child that's in grade school, where you think about like a third grader, where like this person is very impressionable, where, you got to think about it. In third grade, you heard like, oh, you can start a community college and grow from here. It kind of helps pace you, or an idea of like, ooh, I get this. Because a lot of times in research now, we're saying by the time a kid reaches middle school, if they want to go to college, they have an idea of the colleges they want to go to. And so by the time they get to high schools, it's really the reinforcement of them taking stuff off their list. It may add a school, but it's kind of a good idea of what it is. I think another opportunity is working professionals. I know you even talked about like you had friends who majored in one thing in undergrad and now want to go to graduate school for something else. And I'm all for that, because I really believe undergrad serves as your foundation. And so it really gives you a foundation of just your understanding, where I believe like graduate school allows you to kind of build on top of that. Because in graduate school, like a lot of the programs are really focusing on this idea of managing, this idea of systems, this idea of these processes that like yield revenue or yield productivity. And so I think a lot of times having a combination where maybe, you had a psychology major in undergrad, but then you realize I don't want to go to graduate school to be a psychologist. I want to go get an MBA. Actually those two things can actually work very well together, because even in your foundation, you have a good understanding of how people think. And so in that can even yield you into a better place, with an MBA, because you'll have emotional intelligence that most people probably wouldn't have in this field, that could kind of merge together. And so I think in it, I'm always a firm believer in how it's like with this thing, is not one size fit all. It's really like a combination of you really kind of being honest with yourself and where you want to go. What are your strengths? What are your passions? And the biggest thing I'm always like adamant about is just your anchoring. Like what are the things that really hold as your foundation? Like what do you believe? What are the things that no matter what, this is always going to stand firm and true with you? Because I think as long as you pay attention to those things, you'll always be in a good situation where it's not always about this whole thing of, you getting a bachelor's, you getting a master's, you getting your dream job. The more and more as I'm progressing through my career, I'm realizing it's really the journey. It's really this whole idea of, chopping wood and carrying water. It's really the small details of the everyday of like that's how we get to mastery, or that's how we get to this place of really, finding these spaces that really make us energized or make us happy. Because I think that's the thing everyone wants. We all want to make money, but we all want to be in situations where we feel fulfilled by the work we're doing. And so I think if you focus more so on the small things you can do day to day to better yourself, you'll start to understand, the people who appreciate that, the spaces that appreciate that, and everything will start making sense to you about what you need to do and where you need to go, because it's not always bachelor's, graduate school. Maybe you get a bachelor's, you get a certification, you're doing a fellowship somewhere, you taking another internship at 30. It could be a lot of different things. And so I think we just have to have an openness about our own personal and professional growth, where it's not my personal and professional growth isn't going to be the same as yours and vice versa. And so I think in that, we kind of have to give ourselves a lot of grace and realizing that, these things take time.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the big takeaways of the article, too, was that there are many states putting in free tuition programs depending on the pathway that you want to take and the field that a student may want to go in. So what advice would you have for, up and coming students that are aware of that daunting cost of college and maybe they want to take advantage of opportunities, but they don't know where to go yet?
I'd say just research, definitely research. Just really research and see the opportunities that are available, first and foremost in your state where you live, just like the opportunities, you talk about the opportunity how now there's a lot of state funded colleges and universities that are offering these free programs, explore and see if it's a program that interests you. But the other thing is, don't feel a need to sacrifice, what you want just because of the cost of something. And so even outside of these free opportunities, with these programs, there's still scholarships, there's still grants, there's still a lot of different ways. And so I think the biggest thing we have to our advantage is Google. And definitely, just use that and, constantly do research. And another thing I would say, this is something I've done and it's really helped me in my professional growth. Use LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn and find someone who's doing what you want to do, that's in a position that you want to be in. Find someone who's graduated from a program that you're thinking about going to, send them a message, ask, hey, can we connect? I just do an informational interview. I'm thinking about this program. I just want to get your feedback. Because in that, you just really want to do your due diligence about whatever you're doing, where we now live in a space where the barriers for information are so low. And so we have to take advantage of that, where just this whole thing of connecting with people and people sharing information is so accessible. And so I just really encourage people just to, take the time and utilize that, because the more we invest in gaining the information and gaining that insight, we can make better calculated decisions about our future.
Well, thanks again for being able to join us. Look forward to talking with you again.
Okay, thank you again.
Thanks for listening to the Access Success Podcast, produced by AccessU, a division of Access Advertising and Public Relations. Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to keep up with what the world of education needs to hear, at AccessU Agency, and connect with us at accessu.com. Let's do something big.